When I'm out searching for obscure, forgotten video games and hardware, I always make sure to check out my favorite spot to go a-huntin'. Thrift stores. And not just because they have the best stock of Wii Fit boards and out-of-date EA Sports titles. If you go often enough, you'll find the most unexpected gaming goodies. And on one such visit to this old tech purgatory, I saw a box. A box for a controller I had only ever heard of and never actually used before. A controller that went out of production over 25 years ago. And if I just ended it right there with this one controller, that would have been the sane thing to do. I drove over 400 miles and spent countless in shipping costs on eBay and a whole bunch of other websites just to acquire all of these, let's call them specimens. You know, I don't really even like flight sticks all that much. The official name for this is the SideWinder Force Feedback Pro. You might have heard the phrase force feedback before. It's mostly used in high-quality simulation steering wheel controllers. The wheel can turn by itself and give you physical feedback just like a steering wheel attached to a real vehicle. And this SideWinder Force Feedback Pro is supposed to do the same thing, but in a stick. At least, that's what I've been told. Trying to use this with a modern Windows 10 or 11 PC? Not compatible. To make it work, you need to connect it to a computer with this. It's called a game port. Modern PCs don't have a game port. If you buy a USB adapter for this like I did, right here, you'll find out that the force feedback effects won't work on it. So this adapter is useless. The only way I'm gonna be able to play this controller for real is to go out and find a vintage 20-plus-year-old desktop computer from the era that also happens to have a functioning game port. To christen this beast, I installed a fresh copy of Windows 2000 Professional, one of the most stable operating systems of its era. Which was a mistake. It turns out that this controller does not work on that OS. Microsoft never supported it with this controller's drivers. So I'm forced to install an OS that's as close to the millennium as possible, but isn't Windows 2000. We're running Windows Me. I got a copy of Motocross Madness 2 running on here for testing. I know, motorcycle game with a flight stick. Weird, right? The moment I grabbed the controller, it changed me. This is something else. I could feel the weight of the bike, the kickback from accelerating, the sudden jolt of landing on the ground after a jump. It was physical feedback while playing a game like I've never felt before at home. Look, it's still a little strange to use this kind of controller for racing a motorcycle, but it instantly becomes natural. If you try out the racing game Motorhead, in the joystick you can actually feel the difference between asphalt road and rough dirt. This is way more complex than the simple rumbly vibration you'd have felt at the time with Sony's DualShock or Nintendo 64's Rumble Pack. It may be expecting too much to be able to show you in a video how different these controllers actually feel. But check this out. These are force feedback demos bundled with a different joystick, the Logitech WingMan Force. It does pretty much what this Microsoft SideWinder does, but it comes bundled with a really impressive demo suite that does a good job showing off what the hardware is capable of. You can see just how this thing moves, the subtlety that they offer in minor sensations, like a gun recoil, versus the impact of bigger effects like a car crash, a car starting up, and so much more that are going way beyond what any of the haptic vibration technologies at the time provided. Even beyond what we commonly have today. It can even simulate a toilet flushing. Yeah, that's gonna sell them on force feedback. But let's say you want to experience some of this without needing the ancient computers and all the pain. Well, for that, your answer might just be the last force feedback controller Microsoft ever released. This is the SideWinder Force Feedback 2. And you know what the biggest difference between this joystick is and the SideWinder Force Feedback Pro? This just works. Seriously, on my Windows 11 computer, you plug it in with USB and you're done. No setup, no software, it just works. Because, and I can't believe this, Microsoft grandfathered in all of the necessary SideWinder drivers and stuff into their very modern operating system, despite not having made one of these little guys for decades. Why couldn't I have found this one first? So what can you play with these joysticks? Well, here is a selection of what I found. This is a game called Recoil that nobody really remembers anymore because as a tank-like game, it's pretty simple. But with a force feedback stick, you'll get a positional feeling of where you're being hit. The impacts from enemies, you can feel not just that it's happening, but where it is happening. It's like surround sound for your hand. How impossibly cool is that? Do you like Star Wars? Well, there are tons of Star Wars games that get a whole lot better when you use a controller with force in its description. Star Wars Shadows of the Empire's opening Hoth level becomes way more engaging as you feel the rumble of laser shots and boosting your thrusters. Even getting shot down as you spin out of control towards the cold icy planet's surface feels like nothing else. You'll look forward to getting shot out of the air. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer provides multitudes of simulated feedback that adds tons of layers to the gameplay. Your controller will bump every time a fellow competitor hits your pod racer. You can even activate a button that can tighten up the controls on the fly for more precise steering. It almost feels like an all-new game. I can't go over every single Star Wars game in this video, but trust me, there's a lot, and each one, even if you've played them before, plays so much more interesting with this controller. Don't even let me get started on Rogue Squadron 3D. That game is just, it's way better with one of these. Microsoft published a decent catalog of 3D games for earlier versions of Windows that all supported SideWinder's force feedback. And if you can find them, they're still pretty easily playable on Windows 11, with just a little bit of work. Motocross Madness 2, for example, totally playable on Windows 11. Crimson Skies is an alternate history flight combat game with a narrative and some pretty solid voice acting. It's very easy to play, and way more fun to experience with the support of a joystick like this. Effort was put into these games, and although they're not regularly remembered nowadays, they still work, and they're very worth trying out with these controllers. But to really understand just how good this controller can be, for me at least, it all comes together in one specific game, MechWarrior 4. This game includes force feedback compatibility, and I can honestly say I'll never play this game without one of these controllers ever again. The weight of the mech as it walks shifts the controller from side to side. You feel it, like it's really there. When you fire your weapons, you'll feel the strength of your shots, and when you try to aim, the active physicality of the force feedback almost makes you struggle to aim properly, leading to this ultra-deep sense of immersion. Every little bit is sensory overload. It almost seems impossible, but at times while playing, I stopped thinking I was playing a game, and I felt like I was controlling some true-to-life mechanical behemoth. Microsoft's SideWinder force feedback sticks are, in my opinion, the best way to get into this kind of force feedback gaming on old hardware and new. But Logitech does have one interesting side attraction here that Microsoft didn't dare follow up. This is the Logitech Flight Force for the PlayStation 2, and I literally had no idea that this was released on the PS2. The PS2 controller variant does have a problem though. As far as I'm aware, it's only supported by one flight game, Airforce Delta Strike by Konami. Oh, it works just as you'd expect, force feedback like you've never felt on any actual video game console in your living room. But see, now I've got the experience of having used all of these force feedback controllers, and I gotta be honest, this PS2 controller feels like a real letdown compared to all the other PC sticks, including the ones from Logitech themselves. The motor doesn't feel nearly as strong, because I guess it's smaller. It also feels lighter and flimsier, just all around cheaper, I guess. Now this, the WingMan Strike Force 3D, on the other hand, its force feedback feels so much better, and it was made around the same time. But unfortunately, it was only made for PC. It's not like you can take an unsanctioned PC controller and plug it up to a PS2 and just use that right out of the box, because Sony would never have allowed that. They would have definitely put some restrictions in place, but this was made by Logitech. And they both use USB. Somebody definitely had to try that before, right? Well, that works. The PC stick not made for PS2 totally works with this PS2 game. This is so much better than the original PS2 controller they made. Better effects and better controls. I have no idea why this is working, but I ain't complaining. PlayStation 2 collectors out there, time to start hunting for this PC joystick, because this just became the best way to play Airforce Delta Strike. But let's say you still want to experience this awe-inspiring force feedback without the stick. Did any company cater a product specifically to you? Well, to my surprise, yes. Yes, they did. Meet the Gravis Xterminator Force Feedback Gamepad. That directional pad to the left isn't a directional pad at all. It's an analog nub. Oh, they call it a D-pad on the box, but that's bad marketing, folks, because this thing pushes and pulls and moves just like any of the force feedback joysticks I've been using. I have to admit, this is very advanced for its time. What am I saying? This would be advanced now. But how does it work with games? Well, first, this controller came bundled with a small little game you might have heard of called Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. The game fully utilizes force feedback while at the same time showcasing the benefits of this weird analog D-pad nub thing. You can slide your skater left and right with a degree of precision that you wouldn't get from just any old D-pad. It works just like a modern thumbstick would. And I would have said that this game alone was enough to sell me on the idea of this bizarre-looking controller. But I came across one game that completely caught me off guard. People, this controller works with Half-Life. To make this function, you'll need to hunt down a now abandoned mod pack made by Immersion, the company that was behind all the tech that made this force feedback possible in the first place. That pack will need to be installed on a very specific release of Half-Life. Now don't worry, folks. All the files you'll need to get this to work are now safe and secure on archive.org. Link in the description below. It's not super easy, but once you get it up and running, you'll have a completely force feedback experience for your journey through Black Mesa supplied by this controller. And it is just so deeply immersive. As you might expect, firing weapons in this game pushes your directional nub. But here's the fun part though. Fire a shotgun, and because the nub gets pushed back, it adds physical recoil that impacts your game in a way aiming with a simple mouse never would. Gunfights become more realistic because of this, and a bit more hectic, adding a layer of immersion you wouldn't expect was capable from the original Half-Life. But it's not just gun recoil. The folks that made this official mod, they went to work hard. The rolling shutter advertisements that I've walked by countless times before, well, stand close enough to them, and you'll feel the motors inside the blinds rotate. Ride an elevator, you'll feel the vibration of the floor beneath you as you move. Use a health charging station, and you'll feel the thud and pump of the machine. During the iconic elevator crash sequence, you'll sense the elevator rush by you and crash to the ground. We're not just talking about simple combat stuff. Every little bit of this game has been purposely tuned to use this controller. It all combines together to provide a tactile sensation in a way a simple vibration motor would never be able to accomplish. Am I saying this is the best way to play Half-Life? Absolutely not. But what I am saying is this. If you're a fan of Half-Life and you want to experience the game world in a way you've never felt before, this is simply a must-play, because until you've used this, you really don't know what Half-Life has been missing all this time. And it turns out, it was force feedback. Sorry folks, I have to interrupt this video right here because I found something. Something at the last minute that I didn't think I was ever gonna find. Let's say you wanted all that force feedback goodness, but really can't stomach a flight stick or a strange-looking D-pad. You'd need the Logitech WingMan force feedback mouse. Yes, you heard right, a mouse. But I bet you've never seen one like this before. Logitech's driver package for this mouse is pure evil. Pop this disc in and Windows might just stop booting altogether. I spent days reinstalling OSs and tinkering with PC parts around the clock. There are very few games on offer that use the mouse. A patched version of the original Quake is supposed to work, but it crashes as soon as you tap a mouse button. Same thing happens with Unreal Tournament 2003. Instant crash with any attempt to use this mouse. Even Soldier of Fortune has some issues where you spin around in a circle without end right at the start, forcing you to go through the settings to even remotely get it to function correctly. Just as I was gonna give up, I played this game right here that finally showed me what this little device was really capable of. This is a pretty long since forgotten game called DemonStar, and while I have played far better and faster shoot-'em-ups, playing this game with this mouse is a different experience entirely. Absolutely everything has feedback, including the initial takeoff at the start of the level, which will throw your mouse back to match the G-force. Bet you've never seen a mouse do that before. Force feedback in some of the games I've played offered sensations that didn't really impact the gameplay directly. But here's something you might not expect. When you play this game with this mouse, the force feedback effect will actively push you away from enemies, kind of like a guidance system that grabs control of the mouse and moves you. The force feedback implementation here works like an added layer of safety, or a shield, preventing your ship from getting destroyed so easily. You can see here just how this moves when you don't hold the mouse. It just goes everywhere trying to avoid enemy ships. It almost feels like a second guiding hand that works with you. Playing this game with an original mouse is honestly not that great. It feels slow to react to movements, which in a game where you're dodging things isn't very fun. But with this force feedback mouse, the game becomes more playable by giving you this extra advantage. Oh, you'll still get shot by enemies like you normally would, but at least you'll find it easier to dodge other ships on the playfield. If you're ever gonna play DemonStar nowadays, and you've got one of these mice, this is probably the best way to do it. But it's a mouse, and I like first-person shooters, so I really needed to try an FPS with this thing that worked. So I started up Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, a classic Raven Software title. Since the TV series this is based on is all futuristic, you're running around with phasers and all sorts of sci-fi weaponry. This makes for some varied and interesting force feedback effects that add a dimension to the gameplay I've never felt before. It's not just your mouse pushing back suddenly, sometimes the effect is more subtle, like you can feel the power of the weapons you're holding. Unfortunately, where this falls down is that there's a lack of atmospheric effects used during cutscenes or pretty much any gameplay outside of combat. Instead, the mouse just sits motionless. When that happens, it's a bit of a shame, because strangely, you're more aware of it when it's not moving around than when it is. But what it does offer during active gameplay, it makes every single combat scenario feel more impactful, like you could almost feel a phaser firing for real in your hand. It's nothing like the simple vibrations you've come to expect from other controllers. MDK2 has some stability issues, but when it works, boy, it's got some extremely nice touches. You've got feedback for your weapons, sure, but it goes far deeper than that. You can feel the individual footsteps of one of your characters running around. Jumps, combat, hovering, bumping into walls. This game is loaded with feedback effects that feel impossible to describe sometimes. But that is all lost when it just drops back to the desktop without warning. Thanks, Windows Me. And before anyone gets any crazy ideas, Windows 98 is supposed to work with this mouse, but I couldn't get it to work, and more of the games worked on Windows Me than Windows 98, so I'm stuck with that OS. Gruntz is a puzzle hybrid real-time strategy from Monolith that, before making this video, I had never heard of before. And I've got to be honest here, had I played this with a mouse and keyboard, just the regular stuff you would have played this game with back in the day, it would have been very forgettable. But playing this game with this mouse opens up a completely different world. The game works on an invisible grid. You can move your characters freely on the grid wherever you like, but with the WingMan, your mouse will soft lock into every empty space and guide your mouse to the center of every square. When you hover your mouse over top of one of your Gruntz units, the mouse will pull harder and keep you centered. Imagine an RTS where your mouse guides you directly to where you need to be. That is what's happening here. You can kind of see me moving my mouse more freely over here, and when I'm over the unit, it gets more stuck and rigid. Every HUD element feels different. It almost clicks and pulls as you move around over the words, and the top right map area feels almost like your mouse cursor is in the center of a bowl. Impressive stuff for a HUD, and unlike any other RTS game I've ever played. Anytime your characters perform an action like slurping up some goo off the map, please don't ask, that's just what they do, you'll feel the individual gulps they take with your mouse. When they dig a hole, you'll feel the shovel hit the ground. When they get into a fight, you'll feel the tiny little punches they give and take. And when they first appear in the world map as they get warped in through a spinning wormhole, your mouse will spin around to follow their movement. I really don't know what to make of this game, and I don't think it's the best whatever it's supposed to be, but with this mouse, they did an extremely good job here. And I'd almost say it was the best experience you could have with the force feedback mouse if it wasn't for the fact that you can use this thing to play Half-Life. Half-Life is the best game for this device. Everything the Gravis Gamepad does, replicated here 1-to-1. This is using the exact same patch. It can work with the flight sticks as well, but I personally wouldn't want to play Half-Life with a flight stick. Would you? The motor in here has some serious kick to it. It's hard to explain really, and if I show it to you without holding it, the mouse kind of just jumps all over the place. But when the sensation works, it works really well. When you use a health station or energy station on a wall, you'll feel the jolt and pulse of the energy. That opening Black Mesa transit system ride, you'll feel the motion as you travel and even the jolts of the frequent stops it makes. And of course, what you do get that no other force feedback options provide: mouse aiming. In my opinion, FPS games just play better with a mouse. But your ability to aim will be severely hampered because every single weapon has some amount of real, legitimate recoil that will physically shift your mouse and mess up your aim. That might be a supreme disadvantage in multiplayer, but in a single-player experience, it's pretty fun. Something you might struggle with is that you don't have much runway to move the mouse. So when you hit any corner, like this, your aim just keeps moving in that direction. So turning around can look like this. Kind of awkward, right? It's best to set your mouse sensitivity extremely high, but that might not be comfortable for everyone. But here is the real big problem, the one that might stop any of you would-be seekers of this technology. This force feedback patch is insanely unstable on this specific OS with this specific Half-Life version mixed with all of this hardware. You can play for a few minutes, maybe, but you will eventually hit a crash that sometimes can lock up your entire computer. Despite all the problems I had, I really do prefer using this method to play Half-Life. But unless we can find some way to run both this mod and this mouse on a more stable OS, this simply isn't functional enough for anybody. And that is extremely disappointing. So what the heck happened? Where did all of this go? The overwhelming majority of gamers who experienced vibration on Nintendo 64 and PlayStation, well, they probably just assumed that force feedback was the same thing. Heck, even I thought that. Then you had companies like Mad Catz. Yeah, those guys. They released a line of basic vibrating rumble pack devices for the N64 and Dreamcast that were called Force Pack. How confusing is that? It's got force in the name, but it isn't force feedback. Despite the rough time I've had trying to get these sticks to work, once they were working, I've had a lot of fun with them. So why doesn't this tech make a comeback? I mean, in some other form other than flight sticks. Many games require the use of 2 thumbsticks now, so a modern-day flight stick just won't ever be able to support the majority of modern game designs. So how could we do it? Well, this guy, Marius Hire on YouTube, showed off a Hall effect stick with magnets that could replicate this technology. Think of it like tiny force feedback sticks for your thumbs. They can push back. So can we just make this happen? This Marius guy is out there building this stuff from nothing with a real proof of concept. It's criminal that we don't have a modern force feedback in a gamepad anymore. The closest is what's on the triggers for the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller, but I want that in the sticks. We desperately need it in the sticks. Hey Microsoft, If you've been looking for the next thing to get people back on Xbox, this might be it. Wouldn't even be that hard for you. You already did it once before. This is a call to all major players, Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, and even Logitech. Bring this back and put it into modern controllers, because honestly, it might just become the single biggest controller function that the majority of gamers out there never knew they needed. And while we wait for the Force Feedback Legacy sequel, if you can, you need to try these out. Somehow, any way you can. Search your local thrift shops like I did and look for them. We cannot let this stuff get thrown out or forgotten. This impressive technology does not deserve that. Because folks, Force Feedback controllers are probably the greatest video game controller you've never used.